It's good when transit is on time. Nobody likes awkwardly sitting at a bus stop or being yelled at because they're late for work. But as with all things, from making transit YouTube videos to eating pizza, there is such thing as too much of a good thing. Call it perverse incentives, but sometimes when transit agencies rush to do something really well in one way, they actually end up doing something else much worse. Quite literally optimizing for one metric while letting the public down on another. And in cases like this, it's on the public to call the agencies out and to try to get them to work together and find a better solution. Which is what I hope this video can achieve. It's good for transit to be on time, but it's actually not always good, as I'm about to explain to you. Hey there, I'm Reese, and I make videos about transit systems, our attempts to make them better, and how sometimes our attempts to make them better might actually make them worse. An example of transit being made worse so it can look better on paper that I've actually talked about in previous videos is timetable padding, making trains slower so that they can be on time more of the time. To be clear, this video isn't about padding. I already made a video about padding, but this is setting the stage. Train systems run on schedules. But sometimes stuff happens and trains get off their schedule, which is perfectly normal. Because of this, padding, or extra time between stops, is added to schedules. That way, when some random event, like someone holding a door happens, and these things do happen, the train is able to catch back up to the schedule, and everything's going well. This is all good and well, but you need to be sparing with padding. A little bit of padding helps improve reliability, but too much makes your trains needlessly slow. When you look at the schedule for some GO Transit lines in Toronto, which are quite heavily padded, you can see that trains have in some cases become slower and slower over time. And it's not hard to notice that a lot of this started happening when GO introduced a policy that said if a train was late, you could get a refund. So when there's a financial incentive to not be late, and timetable padding can make sure that you don't have passengers asking for refunds because they won't be late, they'll just get where they need to go more slowly, well, it's just kind of a path of least resistance scenario. But padding is far from our only problem. One of the biggest issues that exists for railways in North America is that because they're basically all owned by large freight companies, often other types of traffic, say passenger trains, get deprioritized when they're on the freight train tracks. Now this sort of makes sense. If you're a freight company, you want the freight trains to get where they need to go on time. Passenger trains are not really of your concern. And there are actually laws in the US that are meant to make sure that passenger trains get priority. Since they're faster and more nimble, it's much easier to give them priority than the freight trains. Of course, that law is followed dubiously, but anyways. Unfortunately though, it isn't just freight trains, and this is a sign that we should be modernizing our rail governance and regulations. We should be adopting policies from Europe last century so that situations like the one I'm going to describe don't happen. The clip I'm about to show you is beautiful because it illustrates the problem we have incredibly well. It's from the Rail Cinema, which is a really nice, aesthetically pleasing channel which you should check out. I'll link it somewhere around here. What you can see here is that there are two GO trains, one headed out from Toronto and another one that's headed in. But there's actually a third train in the shot, a fast VIA train in the background. Now you can imagine that it would be great if this VIA train goes through the middle track between the two slower suburban trains and continues on its way, never having to slow down very much. That's just the natural thing that you would expect to happen in Europe or Asia or even on the New York City subway. Having the fast intercity train stop wouldn't make any sense because it's already going fast. In the time it takes the fast intercity train to slow down and the slow, heavy suburban train to speed up, the intercity train could have just gone past its speed and no one would have to be delayed. But from what I can tell, because GO and Metrolinx own these tracks and because they wouldn't want to risk delaying one of their trains 30 seconds or even a minute, they give the slow suburban train priority over the fast intercity one. This forces the intercity train to stop, which delays it significantly, but it also means that it's now going to be slotted in behind a slower suburban train. The middle track isn't really in play here, if you were wondering. To add insult to injury though, it's not just this GO train that the VIA train has to wait for. Because it didn't go in before the first GO train, it now has to wait for a second GO train to travel through on the middle track. But it's not done yet. There's another Via train coming at speed, and you'd imagine we'd let this one go through. These are two Via trains which are of equal value, and so you might as well not force the one that's going fast to slow down, waste all of that energy, and let the one that stopped continue stop for a little bit longer. But that's not actually what happens. The fast train has to stop, and the slow train accelerates and changes tracks. It's just terribly disorganized and not optimized in any way except for potentially avoiding making the GO trains late. Now, I get that this isn't necessarily exactly obvious, but in this case, the infrastructure owner, who is Metrolinx, is mainly incentivized to keep its GO trains running on time. This is just like a freight company who's going to try to prioritize its freight trains. But the problem here is that by minimizing delay for GO trains, you might have crazy delays for Via trains. In this case, if the Via train had have been allowed to go through in front of the GO train, it probably would have barely delayed the GO train. Better yet, since the Via train wouldn't be parked there, it wouldn't delay the other Via train later on. If we were to change things around, we'd go from delaying 2 Via trains a lot to maybe slightly delaying a single suburban train. But unfortunately, the incentives are not aligned to get us to this obviously better outcome. Now, you might kind of justify this in your mind, at least from the GO perspective, going, well, GO trains get stuck behind slow freight trains all the time. Of course, GO is going to prioritize their GO trains when they can. But a GO train blocking a Via train isn't slowing down a train full of containers of toys and coal. It's slowing down another train with human beings on it. And this is all even worse because we know that the GO trains are going to be slower than the intercity trains. So forcing the intercity train behind the GO train is like forcing Usain Bolt to run the 100-meter dash, but he has to stay behind me and I have rolled both of my ankles at once. In cases like this, it seems pretty obvious that our policy should be prioritizing the faster train because it's going to minimize delay across the board. And this is even worse because, as I said in the video, GO trains already have lots of padding in their schedules. The GO train could have waited, and even if it had been delayed, which I don't think it would have been because the intercity train would have passed quickly anyways, well, there was already pad in the schedule, so the train could still be on time. And sure, maybe if we were talking about the Barcelona Metro here, and there were trains every 2 minutes, and you are just gonna slot the train in where it fits, not try to optimize for what type of traffic it is, then this might make sense. But GO trains are running every half hour or hour. Pre-pandemic service still hasn't come back, so this just doesn't make sense. Now ultimately, my suggestion here is that GO should probably get rid of the on-time guarantee, or at least change it so it doesn't lead to weird situations like this. Say that the Via train being there was something you couldn't control and your policy is to minimize delay for passengers overall. On-time guarantees just also don't make that much sense for high-frequency transit service. There's a reason that most subways, sorry Japan, don't have on-time guarantees. It just isn't something people really think about when they're getting on a super frequent rapid transit service. As long as you're not waiting for a long time, and as long as your train doesn't stop for an hour in the middle of the line, you're just kind of happy to get there when you get there. Given that GO is trying to create a more rapid transit-like system, policies like an on-time guarantee make more sense for an airline than for a transit system like that. There should also definitely be a written policy about minimizing overall passenger train delay, because a lot of Via passengers get off their Via train and onto a GO train to go to their final destination, whether that be in Barrie or Brampton or anywhere else. Ultimately, these are the same group of train passengers, and none of them are more or less deserving of being delayed, so we should just try to delay them all less. What's concerning is that this attitude of local optimization is now being designed into our transit system in Toronto. Metrolinx is designing infrastructure in a way that might be better for GO trains, and it might be better for saving them money, albeit in a penny-wise, pound-foolish kind of way. But ultimately, these design decisions are worse for rail passengers overall. It's the classic policy failure. The obvious example of this, and you can already see the construction happening for it in the video, is the reorganizing of this corridor into one with 4 tracks but 2 separate dual-track lines. This is called line running, and we're doing it instead of what I would say is the better approach, which is directional running, where you have a local track and an express track traveling in both directions, with the express tracks in the middle. Now, the devil's advocate case for what we're doing is it saves money, which is a weird thing to prioritize because we're spending billions on GO, so spending a few $100 million on a very useful flyover makes sense, but anyways, I digress. It saves money, you don't need the flyover, but it has a cost as well. Not having local and express tracks means that faster VIA trains aren't going to be able to speed by slower suburban trains on the same corridor. Instead, it's going to be a first in, first out situation. Suburban train, VIA train, suburban train, VIA train. VIA train can't go much faster than the suburban trains. Now, it is still hypothetically possible that we could mitigate this problem if we were to add an extra set of tracks at stations so that the fast VIA trains could overtake GO trains. Timed overtakes are really common in Japan, for example. Unfortunately though, this is Canada, not Japan. No overtake tracks for you, Reese. Thanks for watching. And yes, we should build overtake tracks.